Ilara existed in a world of gray. The gray of dirty water in her scrub bucket. The gray of the stone floors she cleaned until her knuckles were raw. And the perpetual gray of the sky over the Black Moon Packlands. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low, a title branded on her not by birth, but by the cruel decree of her Alpha, Marcus. He had declared her wolfless 5 years ago, on her 18th birthday, when her shift had failed to manifest. The pack, ever eager to follow their leader's contempt, had followed suit. She was less than nothing. Her life was a litany of small cruelties that compounded into a mountain of suffering. She lived in a dilapidated shack at the very edge of the territory, a place where the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls and the floorboards groaned with every step. Her meals were the scraps left over from the pack kitchen, often cold and barely edible. But the physical hardship was a dull ache compared to the sharp daily stabs of humiliation. Lyra, Alpha Marcus's beautiful and venomous daughter, made it her personal mission to torment Ilara. She would accidentally spill drinks on the floors Ilara had just cleaned, her laughter like shattering glass. She would trip Ilara in the courtyard, scattering her meager collection of firewood, just to watch her scramble in the dirt. Each insult, each shove, was a reminder of her place, broken, worthless. Ilara bore it all with a silence that the others mistook for weakness. They did not see the resilience forged in the fires of her lonely existence. They did not know the secret she guarded with every fiber of her being, a secret that was both a terror and a sliver of hope. She was not wolfless. Far from it. Inside her, a beast of impossible scale was chained, a hurricane in a glass jar. It was a creature of pure white fur and eyes the color of a winter moon, a wolf of such immense power that the very thought of it sent a tremor of fear through her. She called her Lyria, a silent, defiant echo of her tormentor's name. This secret was a lethal one. Alpha Marcus was a tyrant who crushed any perceived threat. If he knew what slept within her, he wouldn't just exile her, he would end her. The effort of suppressing Lyria was a constant, draining battle. It manifested as a perpetual, bone-deep cold that no fire could warm. It was the source of her trembling hands and the pale, almost translucent quality of her skin. The pack saw it as frailty. Ilara knew it was the strain of containing an apocalypse. Then, the news arrived. It spread through the pack like wildfire, a wave of shock and nervous energy. The Alpha King was coming. King Kale, the Alpha of Alphas, a monarch so powerful he was more myth than man. He ruled the territories with an iron fist from his distant mountain citadel, rarely descending to visit the individual packs. His arrival was an unprecedented event. A mandatory pack assembly was declared. Every single member, from the Alpha to the lowest Omega, was required to present themselves. There was no hiding, no escape. The announcement felt like a death sentence to Ilara. The king's power was said to be so immense he could scent the truth of a wolf's soul. He would see the hurricane in the jar. He would see Lyria. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the dull fog of her daily misery. For 5 years she had survived by being invisible. Now she was going to be placed directly under the gaze of the most powerful wolf alive. The chains around Lyria's heart felt thinner than ever before. The cold inside Ilara intensified, a freezing premonition of the end. The day of the king's arrival dawned with an unnerving stillness. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. The air itself felt heavy, charged with a power that made the hairs on Ilara's arms stand on end. She was forced into a threadbare but clean dress, her one concession to the occasion, and herded with the rest of the pack into the main square before the Great Hall. She tried to hide herself at the back of the Omega section, a small, pathetic cluster of the pack's unwanted. She kept her eyes downcast, her head bowed, praying to a moon goddess she wasn't sure even listened anymore. praying for invisibility, praying for this to be over. A ripple of movement, a collective intake of breath, signaled his arrival. Alara risked a glance. He moved through the parted crowd like a predator, flanked by a stern-faced beta who seemed to radiate quiet competence. But all eyes were on the king. King Kale was not a man, he was a force of nature. He stood well over 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they seemed to block out the sun. His face was all harsh lines and brutal angles, carved from granite and shadowed by a life of command. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from her lungs. They were gold. Not hazel, not amber, but the pure, molten gold of a dragon's hoard, glowing with an inner light that spoke of ancient, untamed power. He was cold. Not the shivering, internal cold that plagued Alara, but the absolute zero of a void, an emotional emptiness that seemed to suck the warmth from the air around him. He looked haunted, his expression a mask of ruthless control that failed to completely hide a deep, aching loneliness. He was searching for something. His golden eyes swept over the assembled wolves, dismissing them one by one. Alpha Marcus stepped forward, bowing low in a display of submission that was utterly false. His own arrogance was a stench in the air, but even he was dwarfed by the king's sheer presence. "Alpha King Kale!" Marcus boomed, his voice thick with sycophantic pleasantry. "The Black Moon Pack is honored by your presence." Kale didn't even look at him. His gaze continued its slow, methodical sweep of the pack. He was a wolf on the hunt, and every person here was potential prey, or an obstacle. His power washed over the square in a tangible wave, pressing down on them, demanding submission. Alara felt it like a physical weight, forcing the air from her lungs. Lyria stirred within her, a low, guttural growl that vibrated through Alara's bones. "Be still," she pleaded internally, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Please, be still." The king's gaze moved closer. It passed over the warriors, the pack members, the betas. It swept over Lyra, who was preening at the front, her dress scandalously low-cut, her smile a predatory slash of red. He didn't even pause. His eyes continued their relentless search, moving toward the back, toward the shadows where the Omegas huddled. Ilara squeezed her eyes shut. "Don't see me. Don't see me. Don't see me." He was almost past her. She could feel the proximity of his power, a static charge that made her teeth ache. She risked opening her eyes just a fraction. He was walking by, his profile stern and unyielding. A breath she hadn't realized she was holding began to escape her lips in a silent prayer of thanks. He stopped. The world seemed to grind to a halt. The murmuring of the crowd, the rustle of the wind, everything ceased. He stood perfectly still for a second, his back to her. Then, slowly, with the deliberate grace of a panther, he turned. His golden eyes, which had been scanning the crowd with cold disinterest, now locked onto her. The emptiness in them was gone, replaced by a blazing, manic intensity. It was as if the sun had just ignited behind his irises. Alara's world tilted on its axis. A scent she had never known before slammed into her senses. It was the smell of a raging bonfire, of ancient forests after a storm, of pine and winter frost. It was the most incredible thing she had ever smelled, a scent that called to the very marrow of her bones. It bypassed her mind and went straight to the core of her being, to the chained beast within. Lyria roared. Not a sound Alara could hear, but a soul-deep bellow of recognition, of triumph, of pure, feral joy. The chains that had held her for 5 long years didn't just strain, they vaporized. A dizzying, magnetic pull arced between them. It was a physical force, yanking her forward, demanding she close the distance. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. For the first time in 5 years, a flicker of warmth ignited within her, a direct counter to the endless cold. It was his scent, his presence. From the king's perspective, the world had just been reborn in fire and ice. For centuries, his line had been cursed with a dwindling number of true mates. He had traveled the world, his wolf a restless, snarling void in his chest, searching for the other half of his soul. He had begun to believe she didn't exist, that he was doomed to rule alone, a king of ash and silence. And then, he had scented her. A fragrance of crushed wildflowers, of fresh snow, and of a power so profound it was like the scent of the moon itself. It had cut through the stench of the subservient pack and seized him by the throat. His wolf, a beast of shadow and fury that had been silent for a decade, rose and screamed a single possessive word inside his mind. Mine. He had turned, and his eyes found her. A small trembling thing in the back, trying to hide. She was pale and thin, dressed in rags, but her eyes held a galaxy of pain and a core of unbreakable steel. And beneath the scent of her fear and her sorrow, he could smell it. The overwhelming, earth-shattering power she was trying to hide. He took a step toward her. The entire pack held its breath. Alpha Marcus's face was a mask of confusion and burgeoning anger. Lyra's pretty features twisted into an ugly snarl of disbelief and jealousy. She had been so sure he would choose her. Alara stumbled back, her mind screaming. This couldn't be happening. He saw her. He saw her. The king, the most powerful wolf on the planet, was looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. The fear was so potent it was acidic, burning through her veins. He was going to expose her. He was going to kill her. Kyle saw her terror, and a rage unlike anything he had ever known surged through him. Who had done this to her? Who had broken his mate and left her so terrified of her own shadow? His gaze flickered to Alpha Marcus, then to the sneering Beta's daughter, and a lethal promise formed in his heart. They would pay. All of them. But first, he had to calm her. He stopped his advance, holding up a hand, not in command, but in a gesture of peace. His voice, when he spoke, was not the booming command of a king, but a low, rumbling growl meant only for her, yet it carried across the silent square. Do not be afraid. The words resonated in her soul, a vibration that soothed the frantic beating of her heart for a barest second. But then she saw the look on Lyra's face, the pure, unadulterated hatred. She saw the dawning, murderous comprehension in Alpha Marcus's eyes. They thought the king was claiming her, the wolfless Omega. The welcoming feast that evening was an exercise in extreme tension. Alara had been dismissed along with the other Omegas, but not before King Kale's golden eyes had followed her every step of the way. She had fled back to her shack, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She was not summoned to the feast, for which she was grateful, but she knew this was not over. The king's attention was a death sentence in this pack. Inside the great hall, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. King Kale sat at the head table beside a fuming Alpha Marcus, his face an unreadable mask of granite. He ignored the lavish food, the flowing wine, and the fawning attempts at conversation. His senses were stretched thin, focused on the small, dilapidated shack at the edge of the territory. He could feel his mate's fear like a physical echo in his own chest, and his protective fury grew with every passing second. Lyra watched him, her jealousy a toxic acid in her gut. She had spent her entire life preparing for this moment. She was the Alpha's daughter, the most beautiful, the strongest she-wolf in the pack. The king was supposed to be hers. And yet, he had looked at that filth, as if she were a goddess. An ugly, desperate plan began to form in her mind. She would expose the Omega for what she was. She would humiliate Alara in front of the king, prove her utter worthlessness, and show him what a mistake he was making. He was a king. He needed a strong Luna, not a broken, wolfless stray. She exchanged a look with her father. Marcus, feeling his authority challenged and his pride wounded by the king's blatant disregard for him and his daughter, gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Let the Omega be broken completely. Let the king see the trash he was so interested in. The doors to Alara's shack burst open, splintering off their rusted hinges. Lyra stood there, flanked by two hulking warriors who were her personal sycophants. A cruel, triumphant smirk twisted her lips. "The Alpha commands your presence," she sneered, her eyes glittering with malice. "It seems the king wants another look at the pack's favorite charity case." Alara scrambled back, her heart seizing with terror. "No, please." "Oh, it wasn't a request," Lyra said, her voice dripping with venom. The two warriors surged forward, grabbing Alara's thin arms in bruising grips. They dragged her from her hovel, her bare feet stumbling over the rocky ground. She was half carried, half dragged toward the great hall, the sound of raucous laughter echoing from within. They didn't use the main entrance. They dragged her through the kitchens and shoved her out into the center of the hall, right in front of the head table. The music screeched to a halt. Laughter died in throats. Hundreds of pairs of eyes fixed on her. A small, trembling figure in a threadbare dress, held captive between two sneering brutes. King Kale was on his feet in an instant, a low, apocalyptic growl rumbling in his chest. His golden eyes were blazing with lethal intent. "Unhand her," he commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. But Alpha Marcus rose, placing a placating hand on the king's arm, though he flinched at the sheer power radiating from him. "A moment, my king," Marcus said, his voice smooth, but his eyes hard as flint. "There seems to be some confusion. My daughter merely wishes to clarify this Omega's status. For your benefit, of course." He turned his cruel gaze on Alara. "This is Ilara, a wolfless Omega, the dregs of my pack. I'm not sure why she has captured your attention, but allow me to demonstrate her uselessness." Lyra stepped forward, circling Alara like a vulture. "Our king deserves a strong queen, a powerful Luna, not this." She gestured to Alara with disgust. "She can't even perform the most basic duty of our kind. She has no wolf." Alara's eyes darted to Kale. His face was a mask of pure, murderous rage. He was about to intervene, to tear them all apart for daring to touch her. But she knew what would happen. It would be a bloodbath, and it would all be her fault. The secret she had guarded for so long felt like a screaming entity in her chest, demanding release. "Prove it," Marcus commanded, his voice echoing in the silent hall. He pointed a finger at Ilara. "Shift. Show the king the pathetic creature you hide, if you even have one." This was it, the point of no return. The entire pack was watching, their faces a mixture of pity, contempt, and morbid curiosity. She couldn't shift. If she did, they would see. They would all see the monster she kept caged. And if she didn't, they would see her as a liar and a disgrace, confirming everything they already believed. I can't," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lyra laughed, a high, piercing sound. "See, worthless." "I said shift!" Marcus roared, his alpha command washing over her. It was a painful, biological imperative designed to force submission. It felt like hooks digging into her mind, trying to tear Lyria out. Alara cried out, doubling over as she fought the command, the effort making her vision swim with black spots. The cold inside her was now a raging blizzard. Lyria was clawing at the bars of her cage, sensing her other half, her king, so close. The beast would not be denied. Seeing her defiance, Marcus's face contorted in fury. In front of the Alpha King, this piece of filth was defying his direct command. He strode forward and, with a vicious backhand, struck Alara across the face. The crack of the blow echoed in the dead silence. Alara crumpled to the floor, the side of her face exploding in white-hot pain. A trickle of blood ran from the corner of her lip, and in that moment, something inside her broke. It wasn't her spirit. It was the dam, the pain, the humiliation, the years of torment, and the sight of the unholy rage on her mate's face. It was the final catalyst. The last chain holding the hurricane in place shattered into a million pieces. King Kale's roar of fury was lost in a greater sound, a sound that was not a sound, but a pressure wave of pure, untamed power that erupted from Alara's fallen form. The air in the hall crackled with raw energy. The torches flickered and died, plunging the room into shadow, lit only by the eerie silver light that was now pouring from Alara. A collective scream of terror went up from the pack. It was a power unlike anything they had ever felt. It was not the power of an alpha, or even the king. It was ancient, primal, divine. It felt like the moon itself had descended into the hall. Ilara screamed as her body was torn apart and remade. The sound was not one of pain, but of ecstatic, terrifying release. Bones snapped, lengthened, and reformed with audible cracks that echoed like gunshots. Her small frame expanded at an impossible rate. Where her gray dress had been, a coat of thick, immaculate white fur erupted, so pure it seemed to glow with an inner luminescence. The two warriors who had held her were thrown back as if by a bomb blast, crashing into tables and sprawling on the floor, whimpering in terror. Alpha Marcus stumbled back, his face a mask of ashen horror, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. Lyra simply stared, her jaw slack, her eyes wide with abject disbelief and fear. Where the broken Omega had been, a new creature rose. It was a wolf, but it was to other wolves what a god is to mortals. She was colossal, her shoulders easily level with Kale's chest. Her fur was the color of fresh fallen snow under a full moon, without a single mark or blemish. Her eyes, which had been a timid blue, now blazed with the silver fire of a celestial body. This was no Omega. This was no wolf. This was a legend, a myth made flesh. Lyria, the white wolf of prophecy, had been unleashed. A collective primal gasp sucked the remaining air from the great hall. An absolute tomb-like silence fell, broken only by the low, rumbling growl that emanated from the white wolf's chest. It was a sound that promised annihilation. The entire Black Moon pack, from the strongest warrior to the most arrogant beta, fell to their knees. It was not a conscious act of submission to their alpha. It was an instinctual, terrified prostration before a divine being. They were groveling, not before the king, but before the Omega they had tormented for years. Alpha Marcus was on his hands and knees, trembling uncontrollably, his face ashen. He stared at the magnificent, terrifying creature before him, and he finally understood. The cold, the frailty, the failed shift. It was never weakness. It was the containment of a power so immense his pack's magic couldn't even register it. He hadn't branded an Omega. He had caged a goddess. Lyra was frozen, her mind shattered. The creature before her wore her name, but it was a mockery of her own pathetic vanity. This was true power. This was royalty. And she had spent years torturing it. The realization was so horrific it stole the breath and the sanity from her. King Kale did not kneel. He stood amidst the cowering pack, his own body thrumming with a manic, ecstatic energy. The void in his chest where his lonely wolf had resided was now filled with a roaring inferno of triumph. This was his mate. This was his queen. More powerful than he could have ever imagined. The prophecies were true. His golden eyes blazed, not with anger at her, but with a protective fury so potent it was a physical force. He saw the trickle of blood on her pristine white muzzle, the ghost of the human injury she'd sustained. Marcus's final, fatal mistake. With a roar that shook the foundations of the hall, Kale's own body exploded into motion. He shifted, his form swelling into that of a massive wolf of pure, midnight black. He was enormous, an alpha of alphas, larger than any wolf in the room. But he was still dwarfed by the sheer divine scale of the white wolf. He did not move to attack her. He moved to her side, placing his massive black form between his mate and the terrified kneeling pack. He was not her keeper. He was her guardian, her first shield. He faced the pack, a low, lethal growl promising death to anyone who even thought of moving. Then, as quickly as he had shifted, he flowed back into his human form. He stood naked and unashamed, his powerful body radiating heat and dominance. He ignored the gasps, ignored the cowering alpha on the floor. He had eyes only for her. He walked toward the great white wolf, his steps slow and deliberate. The silver eyes of the wolf tracked his every move, a flicker of Alara's own consciousness still visible within their celestial depths. He stopped directly before her. And then, the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the world, the man who had never bowed to anyone, did the unthinkable. He knelt. He went down on one knee before the white wolf, bowing his head in an act of utter reverence and submission. He reached out a hand, not to touch her, but holding it open in offering. His voice, when he spoke, was clear and resonant, filled with an awe and devotion that echoed in the soul of every person present. "My queen." The words sealed their fates. In that moment, Alara was no longer the broken Omega. She was the prophesied White Luna, the true mate of the Alpha King. And everyone who had ever wronged her was now kneeling before her, awaiting judgment. Kale remained kneeling, his gaze fixed on the magnificent creature before him. He could feel the turmoil within her, Alara's human consciousness grappling with the overwhelming instincts of the divine wolf, Lyria. He saw the confusion and fear still swimming in those silver depths, warring with the newfound power. Gently, he reached into his own mind, pushing past the roaring triumph of his own wolf, and sent a single, calming thought across the mate bond that now blazed between them like a newborn star. "You are safe. I am here. You are home." The great wolf's rumbling growl softened. She took a hesitant step toward him, her massive head lowering slightly. The raw, apocalyptic power radiating from her lessened, becoming less of a weapon and more of a presence. She was listening. She was accepting him. Slowly, Kale rose to his feet. He shrugged off the heavy fur cloak he had worn earlier, which his beta, Gideon, had silently retrieved and now offered him. He wrapped the thick, dark fur around his own waist and then turned his blazing golden eyes on the cowering pack. His expression was no longer cold or haunted. It was filled with a lethal fire. "Gideon," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "My king," the beta replied instantly, stepping forward. "Take the queen to my quarters. See that she is made comfortable. Allow no one near her." He looked at the kneeling form of Alpha Marcus, and his lip curled in a snarl. "No one." Gideon bowed his head. "At once, my king." He approached the white wolf, but he was wise. He did not look her in the eye. He bowed his head low and spoke softly. "My queen, if you would follow me, you will be safe." Lyria looked from Gideon to Kyle, a silent question passing between her and her mate. Kale gave a minute, almost imperceptible nod. "Go. I will handle this." Trusting him implicitly, the great wolf turned and followed Gideon from the hall. Her exit was as impactful as her arrival. The pack members flinched away as she passed, their eyes glued to the floor, not daring to look upon the divine being they had so grievously misjudged. As the doors closed behind her, a suffocating silence fell once more, now thick with dread. Kale turned his full, undivided attention to Alpha Marcus, who was still trembling on the floor. "On your feet, Marcus," Kale spat, pointedly omitting his title. The command was laced with such venomous power that Marcus scrambled up as if physically shocked. My king, I did not know, he stammered, his face slick with sweat. No one knew. She hid it. It is a deception. Kale laughed, a short, terrifying sound devoid of all humor. She hid it to survive you. I can smell your rotten cruelty all over this pack. It stinks of fear and oppression. You did not know, because you are a blind, arrogant fool who is unworthy of the title Alpha. He took a slow step forward, and Marcus flinched back. You abused a member of your pack. That alone is a crime. You forced her into a life of servitude and starvation. You allowed your spawn? He flicked his eyes to the catatonic Lyra. To torture her for sport. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. And then, you struck her. You laid your filthy hand on my mate. On your queen. Marcus's blood ran cold. A mistake. A grave mistake, I swear it on my life. Oh, you will, Kale promised, his eyes glowing like embers. You will swear on it, and I will collect. He turned to the rest of the pack, who were still frozen in fear. This is what happens when a pack rots from the head. You followed his corruption. You mimicked his cruelty. You are all complicit. A wave of terror washed over the crowd. But, Kale continued, his voice ringing with authority, your queen is merciful. Far more than I am. Your judgment will be for her to decide. His, however, he jerked his chin at Marcus, is mine. He turned back to the disgraced Alpha. You are stripped of your rank. Your pack is no longer yours. You are nothing. He then looked at Lyra, who was now sobbing hysterically on the floor. And you who dared to harm a soul so pure. You will know the life she led. You are stripped of your rank. You will be an Omega. Not a pretend Omega in your own home, but a true one. You will be sent to the harshest territory in the north, to the Frostfang Pack, where you will scrub their floors and eat their scraps for the rest of your miserable life. Let's see how you enjoy the other side of the whip. Lyra wailed, a sound of pure despair. It was a fate worse than death. As for you, Marcus, Kale said, his voice turning chillingly flat. For the crime of striking the Luna Queen, the penalty is absolute. The penalty is death, and I will be your executioner, tomorrow, at dawn. Meanwhile, in the king's luxurious quarters, another transformation was taking place. Gideon had led the White Wolf into the rooms and then backed away, bowing low before closing the doors and standing guard outside. Left alone, the great wolf paced the room, her silver eyes taking in the opulent surroundings. The soft carpets, the roaring fireplace, the plush furs on the bed. It was a world away from her cold, damp shack. The turmoil inside her began to settle. The frantic energy of the shift receded, leaving behind a deep, humming power that was now a part of her. She felt a gentle nudge across the bond. Ilara, it's all right. You can let go. It was Kale's voice in her mind, a warm, steady anchor in the storm of her new reality. Trusting the voice, she closed her silver eyes and focused inward. She let go of the wolf's form, not by caging it, but by allowing it to recede, to merge back with her human soul. The sensation was not one of snapping bones, but of flowing water. Power coiled back into her core, and she sank to the floor, no longer a goddess of the hunt, but a young woman in the center of a king's suite. She was naked, her threadbare dress having been destroyed in the shift. The blood on her lip was gone, her cheek unblemished. The wolf's divine healing had already mended the human form. But the most profound change was the cold. It was gone. For the first time in 5 years, she was warm. A deep, soulful warmth emanated from her core, where Lyria now rested, content and connected to her mate. The door opened. Kyle entered, now dressed in simple black trousers and a shirt. He stopped when he saw her, his golden eyes softening with an emotion she had never seen on anyone's face, let alone his. It was a mixture of awe, fierce possession, and profound tenderness. He walked to the wardrobe and pulled out a heavy silk robe. He approached her slowly as one would a frightened doe, and gently draped it over her shoulders. His fingers brushed her skin, and a jolt of pure electricity shot through her, a pleasant fire that made her gasp. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble. She looked up at him, her heart fluttering. She should be terrified. This was the Alpha King, but all she felt from him across the bond was an overwhelming sense of safety and adoration. "You are the White Wolf," he said, his voice thick with reverence. "The prophecies of my ancestors spoke of you. A Luna Queen born of the moon itself, destined to unite the packs and rule beside the Alpha King. They said she would be found in the most unlikely of places, a diamond hidden in the mud." He knelt before her, taking her small hand in his large, calloused one. They said her power would be so great it would lie dormant, mistaken for weakness, until her mate found her and called it forth. Tears welled in Ilara's eyes. "I thought I was a monster, broken." "Never," he growled, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. "You were never broken. You were waiting. And I have been searching for you my entire life." He looked into her eyes, his golden gaze intense and utterly sincere. "The loneliness is finally over, for both of us." He explained everything. The ancient lineage of the White Wolves, who were not just powerful shifters but direct conduits for the moon goddess's magic. He told her she was not an Omega, but royalty of a higher order than even himself. Her power had simply been too vast for her young body to handle, so it had suppressed itself, waiting for the catalyst of the mate bond to unlock it. As he spoke, he healed the deep, festering wounds in her soul. Every word undid a year of torment. Every gentle touch erased a memory of a cruel blow. She was not worthless. She was priceless. She was not a curse. She was a miracle. By the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Ilara was no longer the trembling girl from the shack. She was beginning to understand who she was meant to be. A knock came at the door. It was Gideon. "My king, it is time." Kale's face hardened. He stood, pulling Ilara to her feet. "This is your justice," he said softly. "You do not have to watch." Ilara looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of the White Wolf's silver fire flashed in her own eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I do." The entire Black Moon pack was once again assembled in the square. This time there was no pretense, no false pleasantry. There was only fear and solemnity. In the center of the square, a wooden platform had been erected. Kale led Ilara to the steps of the great hall, where 2 thrones had been placed. He seated her on one, a throne of dark oak and silver inlay, and took the other beside her. From this vantage point, she could see everything. She was no longer a part of the crowd, but above it. A queen, observing her subjects. Alpha Marcus was dragged onto the platform, stripped of his fine clothes, clad only in simple trousers. His face was a mess of terror and defeated pride. He looked at Ilara, seated on the throne, and a flicker of his old arrogance returned. This is your doing, you treacherous bitch," he spat. Before Kale could even rise, a wave of palpable power rolled off Ilara. It wasn't the apocalyptic force of her full shift, but a quiet, immense pressure that silenced Marcus instantly and made him gasp for breath. It was the effortless authority of a queen. "You will not speak to her," Kale commanded, his voice deadly. He walked onto the platform, his presence dominating the square. He addressed the pack. "You bear witness today to the price of corruption, the price of cruelty. Your alpha failed you, he failed his pack, and he committed the ultimate crime against your rightful queen." He turned to Marcus. "Do you have any last words?" Marcus looked from Kale's merciless face to Ilara's calm, powerful one. He saw no hope, no mercy. He had sealed his own fate the moment he lifted a hand to her. He merely shook his head, his body trembling. Cale's hands shifted, his nails elongating into lethal black claws. He did not draw it out. His movement was a blur of speed and brutal efficiency. It was over in a second. A collective gasp went through the crowd, and then, silence. Justice had been served. Cale shifted his hands back, his expression grim. He looked at Alara. She met his gaze, her own expression unreadable but firm. She had not flinched. The broken Omega was gone forever. In her place, a queen was solidifying. Their departure from the Black Moon Pack was swift. Lyra was hauled away by two of the king's guards, screaming and crying, on her way to the frozen north. A temporary alpha, chosen by Cale for his integrity, was placed in charge until a permanent solution could be found. As Cale's royal convoy prepared to leave, a new arrival caused a stir. A carriage bearing the crest of a lesser noble house pulled into the square. From it stepped a handsome, charming wolf with eyes that were a shade too clever. He was Lord Valerius, Cale's cousin and a prominent member of the royal council. "Cousin!" Valerius boomed, a wide, charismatic smile on his face. He strode toward Cale, arms open. "I heard the news. A mate. And the legendary white wolf, no less. I came as soon as I could to offer my congratulations." Cale accepted the embrace, but his body was tense. He had never trusted Valerius. His cousin's ambition was a sour scent that his charm could never fully mask. Valerius then turned to Alara, who stood beside Cale. He bowed low, a perfect courtly gesture. "My queen. An honor beyond words." His eyes swept over her, and for a moment his smile faltered. He had expected a savage, perhaps, or a bewildered girl. He had not expected this calm, regal presence. He saw not a tool to be manipulated, but a rival power. "We travel to the capital, Valerius," Cale said. His tone clipped. "Your congratulations are noted." Of course. I wouldn't dream of delaying you. I shall follow with my own guard and join you at the palace to celebrate properly," Valerius said smoothly. "The entire kingdom will want to welcome their new queen." As Valerius walked away, Alara felt a faint chill, a ghost of the cold that had once plagued her. She looked at his retreating back, and the wolf within her, Lyria, let out a low, suspicious growl. She leaned closer to Kyle. "I don't trust him," she whispered. Kyle's arm tightened around her. "Neither do I," he murmured back. "Stay close to me." The journey to the capital was a blur of motion and new sensations for Alara. She saw towering mountains and vast green plains she had only ever dreamed of. But the entire time, a sense of unease lingered, a shadow cast by Valerius's charming smile. They arrived at the royal citadel, a breathtaking fortress carved into the peak of a mountain. It was a city of white stone and soaring towers that seemed to kiss the clouds. It was to be her new home. She was given a suite of rooms so vast and luxurious, it made the king's quarters in the Black Moon Pack look like a hunting lodge. But she felt vulnerable here, exposed. The palace was filled with the sense of countless powerful wolves, all vying for position and favor. Valerius and his entourage had arrived as promised, and his presence was a constant, low-level irritant at the edge of her senses. That night, Cale was called to an emergency council meeting to formally announce his mate and deal with the political fallout of executing a pack alpha. He was reluctant to leave her side. "Gideon will be posted outside your door," he said, his golden eyes dark with concern. "No one is to enter. No one." He leaned down and kissed her, a deep, possessive kiss that left her breathless. "I will not be long." Alara watched him go, the mate bond stretching between them like a taut cord. She tried to relax, to explore her new rooms, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. She walked to the large balcony doors and looked out over the glittering city below. A floorboard creaked behind her. She spun around. The room was empty, but the scent was wrong. The air was tainted with the sour odor of jealousy and betrayal she'd smelled on Valerius, now mixed with the metallic tang of hidden steel. "Gideon!" she called out, her voice soft. No answer. Suddenly, shadows detached themselves from the corners of the room. 4 large wolves in dark armor, their faces hidden by helms. And stepping from behind a tapestry was Lord Valerius, his charming smile replaced by a cold, reptilian smirk. In his hand, he held a dagger forged from silver, its edge glowing faintly. "Such a pity," Valerius said, his voice dripping with false regret. "The king finally finds his long-lost love, only to have her tragically taken from him. The grief will break him. He'll be deemed unfit to rule. The council will have no choice but to appoint a successor." He smiled wider. "Someone strong. Someone like me." Ilara's heart hammered in her chest, but it was not with fear. It was with a cold, rising fury. They had drugged or incapacitated Gideon. They had come here to murder her, to take her mate's throne. They saw her as the same weak link everyone else had. "You think I'm the weak point in his armor," Ilara said, her voice dangerously quiet. "My dear, you aren't a point in his armor. You're the gaping hole." Valerius sneered. He gestured to his assassins. "Kill her. Make it look like an accident if you can." The 4 assassins moved forward, their own silver weapons drawn. They were expecting a frightened girl. They were not prepared for a queen. Valerius made a fatal error. He assumed her power was only in her wolf form. He thought the human girl was defenseless. Ilara didn't scream. She didn't run. She stood her ground, closed her eyes, and reached for the power coiled within her. She didn't need to break her bones to access it. Lyria was a part of her soul. She was Lyria. When she opened her eyes, they were no longer blue. They were blazing with the pure silver fire of her wolf form. A palpable aura of cold lunar energy erupted from her, making the assassins hesitate. "You came into my home," she said, her voice now layered with an ethereal echo, the voice of the wolf and the woman combined. "You threatened my mate." One of the assassins, bolder than the rest, lunged at her. Ilara lifted a hand. She didn't touch him. She unleashed a fraction of the power she held inside, not as a physical force, but as a wave of pure, divine authority. It was the power of the moon goddess, the power to command obedience from all shifters. "Kneel," she commanded. The charging assassin froze mid-stride, his body locking up. His eyes went wide with terror as his own muscles betrayed him, forcing him down onto his knees with a sickening crunch. The other 3 assassins stumbled back, their minds reeling from the wave of absolute command. Valerius stared, his face draining of all color. What is this?" "This," Ilara said, taking a step forward, her silver eyes burning into him, "is the power of a queen." At that exact moment, the doors to the suite exploded inwards, blasted to splinters by a wave of raw kinetic force. Kale stood in the doorway, his human form radiating more menace than 1,000 wolves. His golden eyes were no longer just glowing, they were twin supernovas of apocalyptic rage. The mate bond had screamed her peril to him across the entire citadel. He saw the assassins. He saw the silver dagger in his cousin's hand. He saw the divine silver fire in his mate's eyes as she stood, not as a victim, but as a commander. A fierce, savage pride warred with his murderous fury. "Valerius!" His roar was the sound of a mountain breaking apart. The fight was not a fight. It was a slaughter. Kyle moved in a blur of black rage, a lethal storm of claws and fury. The assassins, already shaken by Ilara's power, stood no chance. They were dispatched with a brutal, terrifying efficiency that spoke of a king who was also his kingdom's deadliest warrior. In seconds, only Valerius remained, standing frozen in terror, the silver dagger falling from his nerveless fingers and clattering to the floor. He looked from the carnage around him to the advancing, deathly silent form of his king. "Kale, cousin, listen to me," he stammered, backing away. "It's a misunderstanding. I came to protect her. They were assassins, I swear it." Kale didn't slow. His golden eyes promised a slow, painful death. But before he could reach him, Ilara spoke, her voice calm and absolute. "Stop." Kale froze, his head turning to her. He was a tempest held in check by a single word from his queen. Ilara walked forward, her silver eyes never leaving Valerius. She stopped beside Kale, placing a gentle hand on his tense arm. She looked at the cowering lord, who had now fallen to his knees, begging. "Exile is too kind for a snake who slithers into another's nest," she said, her voice devoid of heat, but full of icy finality. "He tried to break our bond, to steal your throne, to murder your line before it could even begin." She looked up at Kale, her silver eyes meeting his golden ones. "This treachery deserves only one punishment." Kale looked at his mate, this incredible woman who had been an Omega scrubbing floors just days ago. She was not asking for vengeance. She was delivering a verdict. He saw the strength in her, the unyielding core of a true ruler, and his love for her deepened into something akin to worship. He nodded once. He turned to Valerius, whose face was now a mask of utter despair. "The queen has spoken," Kale said, his voice flat. And he carried out the sentence. The final threat to their new reign was neutralized, not just by the king's fury, but by the queen's judgment. 6 months passed. The snows of winter had melted, and the kingdom was blooming under the warmth of spring. The reign of King Kale and Queen Ilara had begun, not with fear, but with a deep and abiding respect from their people. The story of the hidden white wolf, the Omega who became a queen, had spread to every corner of the territories, becoming a legend in its own time. Ilara stood on the high balcony of the royal citadel, the one she had first looked out from in fear. Now she looked out with confidence. The wind played with her long hair, and she was dressed not in rags, but in a simple, elegant gown of silver that matched her eyes. She was no longer the pale, trembling girl. Her skin was healthy, her posture regal. She was a queen. She had embraced her new role with the same resilience she had shown in her old one. She had a keen mind for justice and a deep empathy for the common wolf, born from her own suffering. She had instituted reforms, ensuring no Omega would ever be treated as she had been. She had become the heart of the kingdom, while Kale remained its unyielding sword. She felt his presence before she heard him. The familiar, comforting warmth of his approach, the scent of pine and bonfire that was now the scent of home. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and he pulled her back against his solid chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his golden eyes gazing out at the kingdom with her. "What is my queen thinking about?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear. "I was thinking about a girl in a shack," Ilara said softly. "A girl who was always cold." She turned in his arms to face him, her hands coming up to cup his harsh, handsome face. "And I was thinking about the king who came and built a fire in her soul." Kale's expression softened, the stern lines of his face easing into a look of pure adoration. The haunted, cold look was gone forever, replaced by the warm glow of a man who had found his other half. She had healed him just as much as he had saved her. "That girl was always a queen," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She just needed to be reminded." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. The mate bond pulsed between them, a serene and powerful rhythm, the beating heart of their new world. "Love you, Ilara," he whispered, "my mate, my queen, my everything." "And I love you, Kale," she whispered back, "my mate, my king, my home. He sealed their vow with a kiss, a tender and passionate affirmation of all they had overcome and all that lay before them. It was not the kiss of a king and his consort, but of two halves of a single soul, finally united. On the balcony high above the world, the black wolf and the white wolf stood together as one. The broken stone, once discarded and forgotten, had become the unshakable cornerstone of an empire, proving that the brightest diamonds are often found in the deepest, darkest places, just waiting for the right light to make them shine.